Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I have some MMA news. Sage Northcutt just made his ONE FC debut earlier today and was face-planted KO'd in just 29 seconds by Cosmo Alexandre. And this continues the streak of former UFC fighters continues the lack of success by former UFC fighters in ONE FC, going 1-2 now, with Mighty Mouse being that only fighter to win, whereas Eddie Alvarez was stopped in the first round, and now Sage Northcutt was stopped in the first round, both by KO/TKO. Northcutt KO'd, Eddie Alvarez TKO'd. And they both, so it's 1-2 with UFC fighters in ONE FC right now. And it brings up an interesting topic out of this news. And a lot of people are going to say, maybe ONE FC isn't that bad, maybe they're on roids, maybe this, maybe that. And I think what the real answer to all this is that the UFC is still, and has never changed, at one time Pride was the better organization. At one time, WC did have the better lightweights and featherweights, because the UFC didn't have featherweights, but whatever cases. At one time, for the most part, UFC overall, for I guess the last decade or more, has had overall the best talent in MMA by far. But just like with any sport, like we said MLB or we say NBA and stuff like that, the best competition is in that organization. Like overall, the best competition, the toughest test, the biggest where it matters the most, the biggest title, where most of the best talent groups to is the UFC. So overall, the best talent is going to be in UFC, but that doesn't mean that people outside the UFC can't beat UFC fighters. Like I'm talking about like other MMA leagues. It's not like the UFC is just so much superior to them that even a guy who just got cut from the UFC, or a guy, the lowest fighter in the UFC, or matter of fact, even the middle tier or close to high tier fighters can't lose outside the UFC. Even the best fighters in the UFC could end up on the losing end outside the UFC. Because it's not like these other organizations just have fighters that just cans. It's just the fact that, also, even on top of that, just whether they're being good or not, there's also, you can have people that are a bad style matchup for you outside the UFC. Like, say Michael Chandler, he did just get knocked out and he suffered some losses. He's not undefeated. But I think he could very well be Khabib, especially Khabib went over there and underestimated. He could definitely get destroyed by Michael Chandler. Even though Michael Chandler's not looking as, undefeatable in his organization, suffered several losses, he could be a bad style matchup for Khabib. He might be the worst style matchup for Khabib. And that's like the best lightweight right now in the UFC. He has the belt. And same with these other fighters, like say Northcutt, he's not the best with lightweight or welterweight in the UFC, not even close, but he went over to ONE FC and got knocked out. Eddie Alvarez, former lightweight champion, got knocked out in ONE FC. But again, let me go back to it again. Like I said, the UFC has the best overall talent. That's where it matters the most. But even some of the best of the UFC, even some of the champions can lose outside the UFC if they don't come prepared, or some adjustments happen, some things they got to adjust to, or just for the simple fact that maybe that fighter just has the better man on the night or better woman on the night, or maybe a bad style match. There's a lot of different variables that can happen. It's like I said, overall, the best talents in the UFC, the best skills, what matters the most. They have the best fighters overall, but on any given day, any man can lose, especially when it's not like you're fighting some lesser competition. It's not like no B leagues or C leagues, D leagues. UFC might be like an A++, and they might be like an A or B. It's not no D- league. ONE FC is one of the top 5 organizations in UFC. In MMA. And you have fighters come for regional circuits, like organizations you never even heard of, or not even going to care to remember, all the time come to UFC and have success, beating fighters that have over 10 plus fights in the UFC. And you have some of them coming there beating former champions and stuff like that, and going on tears. So it's not like it's some big shocker that this stuff is happening, especially not that. And also another thing on top of this, like this lack of success from UFC fighters or former UFC fighters in ONE FC, is that I think the organization is not picking easy pick-em fights for them to pick. I think they're picking good style matchups that can test them. They're not picking style matches where, for sure Eddie Alvarez is going to be able to beat this guy and strike and take this guy down and do whatever he wants. I don't really remember the name of the guy who beat Eddie Alvarez, but it's like his takedown defense was solid. He had heavy power. And they already said that he had a lot of power, and they knew he was a bad dude, especially for his style match. Like, Eddie Alvarez wouldn't have a safe haven to just take him down at will. The guy could strike, the guy had power, so it wasn't an easy style match. And plus, Eddie Alvarez wasn't going to be able to cut weight. It was like he was fighting a guy who was a little bit larger than him. So it was a lot of different variables going in there, fighting at a different time. And, Eddie Alvarez's defense is kind of questionable at times, his chin questionable at times, but it was even his chin, his eye kind of basically almost exploded. That's why he got TKO. But whatever the case is, they didn't pick him for him in that fight. Then you got Sage Northcutt. I said this was the clearest point where they picked a fighter that they knew could beat Sage Northcutt. They picked Sage Northcutt, they hyped him up just to get people to tune in. But they picked a style matchup where they knew that Sage Northcutt could get screwed up. Because Sage Northcutt's striking defense never has been the best. His chin's never been the best. This is not the first time he's been KO'd or, in an MMA platform. He was knocked out in one of his amateur fights. And he get knocked out in a pro. And he's been dropped like at least twice in his pro career. I think he was dropped by Zach Otto. He was dropped by, of all people, Mickey Gall. I think it was the same thing, like a right-hand hook, but Mickey Gall just kind of threw that blindly, where you're going against a guy who's bigger, taller, far more experienced in kickboxing than you, in Cosmo Alexander. That's not no just some any run-of-the-mill MMA fight. That's a guy who has tons and tons of MMA experience and tons of like this combat experience. One of the main people that have been around Black Zillions for a long time. So he might not be known to the people. He's not there's no some random old guy. That guy's won kickboxing titles and probably one of the best striker that Sage Northcutt has fought in all of his MMA career. So, and they put him against him, and we saw if you're getting dropped by Mickey Gall. Imagine when you fight a real top-notch kickboxer, whether he be old or not, he's gonna be able to find those same opportunities much easier, much clearer. It's gonna be, especially with your hands down, circling right to that. It was pretty much easy path to victory for him. It was right there, open and exposed, but pretty much like. Want to see if he did a good job of picking fighters for them to fight, but it's still like they didn't pick fighters where it's going to be like it's going to be destroy these UFC fighters, but they didn't pick fighters where the UFC fighters are supposed to run them over. But in the case, they were pretty good matchups. Well, Cosmo Alexander kind of was supposed to run over Sage Northcutt, but Sage Northcutt maybe could implement some wrestling. But in case, it only lasted 29 seconds, so he never got to wrestle. But like all in all, good style matches for competitive fights. And maybe make it hard for the UFC fighters. And the UFC did the same thing with Ben Askren when he came to UFC. They try to pick maybe a fight. Yeah, another thing about it is how they make these matchups. Like they pick fighters that maybe aren't the easiest matchups, maybe the worst matchup they could pick, and also the fighters that really won't say nothing about the organization's fighters. Like, because what I see, don't want UFC fighters coming over and just dominating their ranks. So they give fighters that could test them, could potentially beat them, but at the same time, fighters that won't make the organization look bad if they lose. Like, say they didn't put them in championship matchups where potentially their champions could lose or look bad. They put them against guys who weren't like really in a title picture, but could at least pose some threat. Like, same with UFC, they put Ben Askren versus Robbie Lawler, because they say, oh, Robbie Lawler, former champion, he might be on the downtrend of his career, but still has good takedown defense, has knockout power, so maybe he could defend Ben Askren takedown and take advantage of Ben Askren not having striking and knock him out. So the UFC would try and do the same thing. But if Ben Askren beats Robbie Lawler, all they say is Robbie Lawler's old and done. That's all they would have said. So they would try and do the same thing in the UFC, and it almost happened. But Ben Askren woke back from the dead and put his name in a bulldog choke. And whether Robbie Lawler went out or not, Ben Askren got to win. So they try to do the same thing on both ends. It's just that the UFC wasn't successful and ONE FC was. So that's pretty much the whole point of this thing. But to sum it up again, UFC is still by far the best overall talent, the best place for fighters. It's like as far as talent-wise, skill-wise, and all that stuff, they have the best fighters overall. But the same with anything, like NBA players can get beat by regular street players. They could be beat by European players. They could be beat by this. Just because you got a bigger name brand attached to you don't mean you're all so much undefeated when that nobody outside of that league can beat you. You can get beat by any man on any given day, especially that man that's training day in and day out and putting his all into his craft just the same as you are. You know better than him. You got to get up for everyone and got to respect everyone the same, or you're going to end up losing and be embarrassed. But that concludes this video. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and come back for more videos. Peace.